Hi, Marie. Thanks for joining us today. So for everyone, I'm Huw Davies, one of the co-founders and CEO at Ozone API. Marie, I wonder if you could just very quickly introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what you do.
So I'm Marie Walker. I've been tracking open banking and open finance, and now looking into the broader smart data, open data future since 2016, and I've probably known you very similar amount of time. I do two things really. I'm the resident open futurist at Radium. Basically, that means that I spend my life talking to people and trying to work out where we're going, what it's going to look like, what's interesting. And that's all part of my role in Radium, evangelizing really about the trust framework that they have invented for UK open banking, and then deployed to great effect in Brazil for open finance and open insurance, and a whole raft of other open data ecosystems that this technology enables from the core. Alongside that, for quite a number of years, I've been sharing what I think is interesting on a daily basis on a free news feed called Open Conversations, and that opens up a huge number of doors and interest viewpoints into things that are happening around the world, not just in open banking and open finance, but related technologies as well. So I'm a bit of a generalist, but an extremely passionate and interested observer of what's going on.
Well, fantastic. So thank you for joining us. And I mean, well, as you set up in your intro, open banking and open finance is now definitely a completely global phenomenon. And as it's rolling out around the world, I think one of the things we're seeing is we're actually seeing more complexity rather than less, as we're seeing different frameworks, regulation, standards emerge. And in fact, that's why we set out to develop and launch the global open data tracker. And it's really on that topic I wanted to get your thoughts. So as the world of standards and frameworks continues to evolve, and you are, as you said, as the brains behind open conversations, you have perhaps one of the broadest perspectives in what's going on. And with the work you guys at Radium are doing to drive ecosystems around the world, again, you've got great insight. So I'd be really interested in your thoughts on what's sort of one of the most interesting things you're seeing around the world in the development of open banking and open finance at the moment.
Yeah. Gosh, you've limited me to one. That's the tough part. Just to echo what you said a minute ago, it really is a force. I think we've reached a tipping point. It's very difficult to find a jurisdiction that isn't looking at open finance, and they are looking at open finance. They're not talking about enabling open banking, but they're looking at enabling more than the basic sort of functionality of payments accounts. So we have a point now where the movement has been educating people and explaining what the worth is and what it's going to do for your economy and how it's going to build into your digitizing and transforming your financial sector. And it's looking at now people rushing to get legislation to start mobilizing their industries. So the biggest sort of movement or action is simply that movement and action globally. Now, when you start looking at the details of that, it becomes really quite complicated depending on which country you're talking to. Obviously, there is no one set standard. Life would be a lot easier if there was. I don't think realistically there will be a single standard in the immediate future. There are too many different opposing drivers and peculiarities about different markets for that consensus to come. But what and I think everybody is very much hoping for and working towards is interoperability of the different standards. Now, the other thing about the standards would be making sure that people are adhering to them. So conformance is a huge issue, and that's something we actually do in Radium in order to maintain the health of the ecosystem. And I know you guys at Ozone do as well, because it's so important, because if you have APIs that are not conforming to the standard, not performing optimally, then the whole ecosystem is not working properly. And if you have a breakdown in that ecosystem in terms of the service levels that developers are receiving and customers ultimately are receiving, then that is a massive point of friction, which is going to damage the adoption. And I think that's something we've seen in various different parts. But even before you get to the standards, there are some challenges. So, for example, I was chatting with Mexico yesterday. They announced that they are going to push forward to have open banking legislation by the end of the year. This comes 5 years since the fintech law, so they have been doing things in the interim, but the actual sort of impetus of having open banking regulations has been missing. One of the issues that I wasn't actually aware of that is complex for anybody preparing their house for open finance in Mexico is that TPPs are not licensed there at all. So there are all sorts of peculiarities around the world that still need to be resolved, and I think that's one of the sort of things that we will start to see more movement on. And I think that's one of the reasons why your tracker is so useful, because there isn't one standard size fits all globally. So finding out who's at what stage and what help they might need and how to assist them is quite complex still.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And no, it's interesting. I like your perspective on the most interesting thing. And I honestly, I really agree. I think what we're seeing as we're talking to regulators and banks and participants around the world is there's a real recognition that this is a transformative force for good. It's something that drives economic growth, better outcomes for customers, and tackles real sort of societal challenges. And with that, we're seeing banks now really recognizing this is a channel that will help grow their business. So, yeah, you talked about the drivers. Some of the early markets, it was more about competition, and it created some tension. And I think now we're seeing actually recognition. This is a transformative force for good. It needs to be done really well. So with that said, you mentioned a bit about the importance of standards and conformance with standards, but what do you think are some of the barriers that are still getting in the way of adoption accelerating even more quickly?
I think there are a few around monetization. So we've yet to see the real commercial model coming out, the sort of obvious no-brainer revenue generation. That's something where if the banks can see that their premium APIs are getting traction, and investors in the fintechs are beginning to see returns on some of the business models that they're exploring, I think then that will create more investment, more motivation, more awareness generation. And I think that's one of, it's at any frontier moment, there is that point where the technology is great, people can see that it's got huge value, but it's a slow burn. And I think, going back, I was talking about this the other day with somebody, and we forget how long it takes for new technology to become adopted. So the technology for mobile phones was around for many, many years before it became the norm for people to have a mobile phone. And the same with contactless cards. I remember how that was a hugely slow burn, and people were talking about all the terminals and the complexity that would need to be in terms of changes in store. And now everybody pays by contactless and everybody has a mobile phone. So one of the things I think that you and I do a lot of is talking to people about getting yourself ready for when adoption really starts to roll, because that will happen. There is no disputing the fact that the data economy is coming, and we're on the cusp of it at the moment with what has happened so far with open banking and open finance. And it won't be limited to finance, and it's already not being limited to finance. We're already seeing cross-sectorial ecosystems. We're already seeing things like the Smart Data Initiative in the UK. So in terms of getting us to that point where it starts accelerating, I think that the groundwork has been done, and we now need to just put out those sort of killer use cases. And I know that's easier said than done, but I mean, there's such good work being done in credit, for example, particularly in emerging markets. Having a well-funded SME layer is critical to the strength of the economy, and most of the countries that are in regions that are developing are looking at that in particular for open finance. But it's not just credit. There are lots of examples where the payment side is beginning to have more varied use cases. It's beginning to become more prevalent in the user journey. So there's lots and lots of things happening. I don't think there's going to be one big bang moment when we suddenly sit down and go, wow, gosh, it's really here. It's a slower sort of creep, and suddenly it'll be ubiquitous.
No, I agree. I mean, I guess like the internet and mobile phone and some of the things you talked about, this sort of foundational transformational capability to have consent-based sharing of data and consent-based initiation of processes can solve so many different things. I agree. We'll see many use cases, and each will have their own catalysts. They'll have their own sort of contactless adoption moment, as you said, and I think we're just seeing that build. So, no, I agree completely. So, I mean,
just on that point, I think when we start seeing the consumer understanding the value of their data, they will start driving adoption, because when they start getting rewarded, and I'm not necessarily talking about financial rewards, but in terms of more appropriate products, easier customer journeys, then they will demand it. And I think with self-driving finance and AI, we're starting to sort of see the early portal really to what that could look like for people. Because I remember conversations a few years ago when we were talking to people about having ownership or control of their whole data self. And you get these blank looks with people going, well, I haven't got time to do that. I don't know what to do, and so forth. Whereas when we have interfaces that are making those decisions in your best interests and you are being rewarded for it, I think then again, that will be something that will be a pull for adoption that we haven't seen so far today.
No, I agree. So actually building on from that, I mean, this is a long-term journey, loads of progress already in many markets around the world. But in the next year, give us a prediction. What do you think we're going to see coming?
I think we're going to see a whole number of new central banks and regulators adopting open banking, open finance globally. I think you and I know there are a lot of conversations underway, and I think there'll be some big moves. In terms of actual products and solutions, I think we're going to see many more solution-based products. And by that, I mean, the old adage, nobody buys a mortgage, they buy a house. There are lots of initiatives around improving things like house buying or car ownership or health. I think we're going to see some more solutions-based products coming to the fore. That's certainly something that the big banks are talking about. So a physical manifestation of the banking as a platform strategy. I think there'll be some high-profile cases for that. So, yeah, I think generally, I think it's very exciting. I think the next sort of 2 to 3 years is a really exciting period, and any central bank, regulator, or a large enterprise that hasn't already got a position for this emerging data economy, they really do need to start doing so now. So I think I think you and I are going to be very busy.
Yeah, I mean, well, we are right now, and I agree with you. I think it's only going to get busier, which is very exciting. So that's an amazing note to end the conversation on. So Marie, thank you. It's been really interesting, and yeah, let's continue to drive this. Thank you.
I shall keep an eye on your tracker.
Thanks.